Does
Okay.
everybody get that warning? Probably.
You're good to go.
Thank you all for joining. Elizabeth Kirk, hi, how are you? And John Damianakis, did I say that right? You're muted, John.
Close enough, Damianakis.
Damianakis.
Perfect.
And we have Kay Jackson. Hello, Kay Jackson.
Hello, how are you?
Good, thank you. I want to introduce my guests in a minute, but if you guys, Elizabeth, John, and Mr. Jackson, can you just say where you're from and how you heard about this so I get a little context? Elizabeth, do you mind?
Hi, my name is Liz, and my son is Tyler, and he's going to be a PG student at Williston next year, playing hockey.
A hockey player, PG at Williston North. Thank you, Liz. How about you, John?
My name is John Damianakis. My son goes to Williston. Again, a hockey player. He's going to be a senior next year.
Okay, all right. And Mr. Jackson, what brings you here?
My name is Kip Jackson. I'm a coach at Merrimack High School, and heard about this through my athletic director as well as conversations with a Mr. Jeff Levin.
That would be me. Kip, nice to see you. We don't see you, but if you dare to turn your camera on, I'm sure we'll all be suitably impressed.
Face Nape Radio, man. I'm good.
So we have as many presenters as we have guests, but so be it. Today, this is the second of 4 workshops we're trying to publicize, and I want to share the screen and show you the agenda for this, which is here. This is the invitation, right? Play free and love each other. Helping student athletes succeed in the digital age. A webinar series for coaches and parents. This is a sign in the locker room at the Smithfield, Rhode Island High School hockey room. S for Smithfield. Your guess is as good as mine. Three hammers. Play free and love each other. These are stones from the beach down in Newport, Rhode Island. Epoxy to the sign. So when you leave the room, you touch the grit. You're going to be gritty. You're going to play free. You're going to love each other. That's what Coach Jackson preaches down there. So the first one is not on here, but the first one was on, the first session was really on the factors that are causing kids to struggle with their grit, with their ability to play free, with their ability to be confident and enjoy childhood the same way the 6 of us enjoyed childhood. And so the second one, back to this, tonight's is, and I'm going to review the first one. This is on vulnerability and accountability. In this webinar, Jeff and special guest Dan Boothby, whom I'll introduce, and also Heather, talk about how important knowing how to be vulnerable is in athletics, how to be vulnerable in athletics, because giving your all is a form of being vulnerable. Holding your teammates accountable in a selfless way is also a crucial part of successful team play. Vulnerability and accountability, right? And we provide tips on how to get young people to be more comfortable being vulnerable and hold each other accountable that build positive team chemistry instead of damaging. So vulnerability and accountability, the first session, and then I'll introduce Dan and Heather. The first session was on basically on the following 3 acronyms that, at least in my house, have entered the lexicon, and probably Heather and Dan and Kip probably have heard, but we have an overwhelming tragedy list in this world of global warming and political dysfunction and phone addiction and opiates and school shootings and utterly unmentionable factors in the culture that none of us dealt with as kids. The grown-ups haven't acknowledged the overwhelming tragedy list in any comprehensive way. And many grown-ups have fallen prey to the second acronym, which is the new Parenting Playbook, where we tend to prepare the road for the child instead of the opposite. There'll be a quiz on this at 7:45. Overwhelming tragedy list, new Parenting Playbook, And the big one with which I think kids are afflicted, outcome fever. I worry about how I look. I've been worrying about whether I get likes on Snapchat and Instagram since I was 12. And I'm fundamentally concerned about the outcome of everything I do. Moving backwards, because my parents have perhaps enabled me a little bit too much because they're worried about the overwhelming tragedy of this. Make sense? That's how I look at things today. And we talked last week with Coach McDonald from UNH football emeritus, and a player from Bates lacrosse, Jack Lucerari. And Abby, if you get a second, if you can put the link into the one we did 2 Tuesdays ago in the chat here, I'd appreciate it. And so you guys who are new here, if you want to go back, if you enjoy tonight, when at your leisure, you can go back and watch the one we did last week, right? So Dan Boothby is on the call. Dan, I'd like you to introduce yourself, some of your own, experience as a kid with athletics, and since you've been an adult, what you've been doing in and around young people in athletics, and then I'll introduce Heather.
Well, thanks, Jeff. Thanks for the opportunity to be here tonight and meet all of you and just talk and share my experiences, but also my observations. So I grew up in a small town in Maine, southern Maine. Grew up on a farm, had a great childhood, being close to the beach and horses and all sorts of activities. And sports became important to me, even despite maybe a lack of athletic ability. I was able to find a spot, in football and achieve some level of I wouldn't call it success, but maybe recognition, and wonderful opportunities, and went to college. Got an opportunity to play at Central Connecticut and had a scholarship and all of that. But at that point, it had kind of changed for me, and it had become a lot about kind of living up to that identity for me personally. And I did lose a little bit of the joy for the game. I would say I lost more of the joy for the practice piece of it. I always loved the games, but I think it was a lot driven by fear, and that fear drove me to focus on, the athletic strengths I had, was I was big and strong, and so that's where I focused all of my effort in the weight room with strength coaches, doing all of those things, getting acknowledgement and recognition for things I was good at, maybe missing out on some of the areas that I could have focused on that would have made me better, well-rounded athlete. But at that point, looking back, I didn't know the time. I think it was more about, living up to that identity, holding on to identity as an athlete, even though I was just, an offensive line and not the most athletic person out there, but my whole routine being around that. So with all that said, there's a lot of effort and work, and I actually started having some injuries later in my college career, which got me really interested in biomechanics, and started working with one of the deans in our exercise science department, and then shortly after graduating, I did some work there, and then I came to Northeastern. I had a wonderful opportunity here under my former boss, who's now with the Celtics. Very forward-thinking, big into the biomechanics, the injury prevention, and just through those experiences, I started learning more and more about why, my approach and kind of the path that I fell into that's comfortable to me, gave me the mission that I wanted to do at the time, but also made me more aware of some of the other areas that I was deficient on and didn't really focus on. And so that was nearly 20 years ago. And through the last 20 years here at Northeastern, we've been collecting a massive amount of data on our athletes. And what we found in those trends is there's a direct correlation between all of these athletic qualities, proficiencies, and the central nervous system and that emotional tone. And we see, our student athletes who are, going through an injury, elevated stress, and we see breathing profiles or aerobic capacity, jump numbers, whatever it might be, they all seem to be impacted. And that's even more evident when we see our student athletes who are having some sort of emotional distress. Aerobic capacity goes down, power output goes way down, power strategies that our athletes utilize to create these outputs become more faulty or less reliable, consistent. And their movement qualities also are affected. And so looking at all of these things, we've been able to identify risks for injuries, but also be able to identify non-exercise interventions that could be appropriate and effective. And so that's what we've been doing here at Northeastern. We have a great group, great coaches who are very open to this approach. And sometimes we're telling coaches, hey, we're going to back off the volume or the intensity, or maybe give this person an extra day. And most of that's all subjective. But that's kind of the 5-minute overview.
I think where the whole concept of vulnerability fits into, if you take it as a premise that these kids are way more stressed than we were when we were younger, right? They have so much coming at them. Dan and I have talked a lot, and then I want to get Heather in the mix. We've talked a lot about the effects of stress. I've learned a lot about the effects of stress on the central nervous system and on the body. And I think we see, and Heather, I'll ask you to speak about it. We see a generation of kids that have way more stress, and it's affecting their athletic performance, which is a vicious circle, because then if they don't play well, given that they have this outcome fever thing, they're upset. They're upset with the outcome, right? So Heather, can you say a few syllables about your background and what you're seeing with kids?
So my name's Heather Wilson. I'm an athletic trainer at Colgate University. I've been at Colgate for almost 16 years now. So, I think in just my time here, I've been an athletic trainer for 21 years. So I've been at the Division III level. I've been at the professional level. Marketably, most of my career has been spent at Colgate. So, I think in terms of the changing student athlete is what I like to say. We when I got here, we had student athletes that were just happy to be here, happy to be playing, and I know that most Division I athletes are high achievers and they wouldn't be at the Division I level if they weren't, and they have to be talented and all those things. But now that level has been raised to an almost unattainable level in my experience, especially in the last couple of years. The academics are insane. They have to be good in the classroom. They have to be good in the community. They have to be, in a Division I athletic setting and be excelling. And they're not capable sometimes of doing all of those things at the highest level that they want to. So, there comes the mental piece of this where, kids get overwhelmed and overstressed. And then again, it's this vicious cycle that we talk about. They get injured, right? They're not sleeping. Then, and then they try to come back and they're not eating well. They're not hydrating well. They're stressed out. They might be behind in class. We see this with a lot of post-concussion kids too. They get behind in class and they're trying to catch up in class, but then they're trying to come back to athletics. And it's overwhelming. And sometimes there has to be a break at some point where they either, accept the fact that they have to take a step back and really get healthy holistically, or they end up breaking down. And, those are the kids that come to my office and I have to call their mom and be like, can you please come get this kid because he's not doing well right now, kind of thing. So that's just my 2 cents on the perspective of vulnerability and what's been happening. I think if people know, like, you're not winning as a team, that's also another stressor. Your team's not doing well, if you're getting beat by teams you shouldn't, if you think you should be playing more, all of those things are involved in these kids' lives and just creating havoc on their psyche and their holistic mental and physical health.
Yeah, the news is startling, when you talk to coaches and trainers even at high school. I don't know, Kip, if you want to jump in. Kip coaches high school football in New Hampshire. Kip, can you jump in around the issues of stress levels and outcome fever and the notion of vulnerability? You there, Kip?
Yeah, right here. I'm waiting for you to finish.
Yeah, well, that'll be a while. But can you jump in?
Yeah, I mean, just kind of echoing what everybody else has said. It's not just what's happening within an individual sport. There's so many other factors now that are, I think, causing stress in young folks, whether it's for high school kids, especially if they're going to be able to get into a college, what college they should go to. They're worried that they may disappoint their parents. Are they doing as well as their siblings did? I mean, they're stressed about pretty much everything. And then going back to the outcome fever, which to me is probably the biggest stressor, is how are they perceived by their peers? More than anything else, I think is a big stress for them. And are they, the kid that other people look up to versus just having a good time and enjoying life? It feels like they're unable to do that now, unable to just enjoy the moment. They're always worried about something else.
Yeah, and all of this stress and emotional tone, like Dan calls it, the kids really struggle. I think the boys, in some ways, more than the young women, with being vulnerable and saying, "Hey, coach, I'm struggling." I don't know that they always know how to put a name on it. I'm curious, Liz and John and another person, Janie, joined, who's also, I understand, a Williston hockey parent. Not so that we're talking at you for an hour. What are you guys noticing with your sons? These are high school boys, I think, a PG, a senior, and Janie, I'm not sure how old your son is, but could any of you jump in on what you've heard so far and what you're noticing with your kid?
Don't say anything.
Anybody?
Well, I'll just agree that it's hard for some students and some student athletes to express their emotions and to be vulnerable. And my child is pretty quiet, so I encourage him to be more vocal about how he's doing and to show some enthusiasm and actually, express if he's nervous or excited about something or disappointed. And, we get parts of it at home, but I don't know how he does with teammates. And I think that, I just want him to connect with people in a meaningful way. And I think sometimes he might be limiting himself and not connecting with people enough, at least connecting with teammates and connecting with friends, because he doesn't know how to verbalize or he doesn't want to say too much,
What percentage of that, Liz, is your son's nature, that he's just a shy, maybe introverted guy? And
Yeah.
what percentage of it is, do you think, the effects of what I call the digital age, the overwhelming tragedy, all this junk coming at him? How do you see that split?
My personal analysis is that it's always been his personality, and probably the digital element doesn't help because it's a crutch. You've got your phone, you've got you don't like making a phone call. I've actually made him call and make appointments or order food or do different things because that's just not his natural comfort. A lot of students don't like making phone calls. They rely on Snapchat and all the other ways of communicating. So
Right. Judge Broderick says there's no emotional growth on a screen, pushing buttons, and again, I think we've protected kids from the regular trials and tribulations of childhood a little bit. Janie or John, did you guys, either of you wants to weigh in?
Sure, I'll offer a few comments.
Please.
I would say, you know, the hockey culture is pretty intense. Probably like a lot of other team sports. I think that there's a lot of pressure to conform. I think that social media has really made it difficult for kids to enjoy this sport where they are. I think they're always hearing about this person got drafted by, you know, this team. I just got it tonight. I was late because I was talking to my son, and he's telling me about all the kids that were drafted by this more advanced hockey program, the USHL. I think they're always trying to get to the next level. They're never really having fun where they are. There has to be a purpose to everything they do. And I feel like as much as they love the game, or at least in my case, as much as my son loves the game, my daughter plays too, at a different school, it's sort of like they're playing for a duty to get somewhere and not for the joy of playing the game. And I'm looking forward to the time when I'd like him to reach his goal, because it's what he's wanted since he's 6 years old. But I also hope he does it because he can finally be done. He can finally enjoy where he's going to be and not always have to be looking to climb the ladder to the next level, which creates a lot of pressure.
Yeah, your comments harken back 2 weeks ago. The link is in the chat. This young man, Jack Lucerarian, plays lacrosse at Bates. He went to a prep school, you know, and he just said, look, I've been, quotes, grinding, doing this thing to get to that thing, to get to that thing, to get to NESCAC, to get to there. And he said, I really am not having that much fun. And Janie, I hope your son's experience is different, that if he wants to get to the USHL or play D1 hockey or play for the Pittsburgh Penguins. But I think you know, when you can tomatoes and you vacuum out all the air out of the jar so the tomatoes don't spoil, I think without thinking about it, we've sucked a lot of the fun out of sports. And it's hard to even say that, but I'm absolutely convinced of it. And this isn't necessarily on the topics of vulnerability and accountability, but it's a problem. And my friend John, you're looking pensive. Did you want to jump in?
No, that was, she said it very well, perfectly, actually. Perfectly. That's how it is. My son too, everything he does, he's always thinking of the future. He's never at the moment, you know, have some fun and just let go. And the coach tells him all the time, he tells him, you know what, just have fun. Who cares? But he just can't.
I'm convinced that, and maybe we can do this, you know, Derek Cunha is a colleague and a friend. I've been in that room, is to get a bunch of parents to come to school and say, listen, fellas, we're spending money and time and driving here to see you fellas have fun, F-U-N. And the kids know that, you know, if they're playing pond hockey and there's nothing at stake, they all will tell me, yeah, I have a blast. In fact, I tell them, just pretend you're playing pond hockey or touch football with your buddies, depending on the sport. But outcome fever has taken them over. And I'd like to ask Heather and Dan, you've been both at this collectively for over 40 years, it sounds like. Have you seen changes in these kids' bodies? The way they hold themselves, any of that stuff? I think Heather's talking to somebody else, I think, but Dan, Dan, you know, we're all multitasking, right? Dan, have you seen changes in these kids' physical bodies?
Certainly. You know, the postural quality, postural control, that's one of the first things that we look at. We're seeing, you know, the posture has kind of deteriorated, which has affected kind of the the peripheral joint range of motion, shoulders, hips, knees, ankles. We're seeing a lot more asymmetries, right to left, so, those muscle imbalances. And especially in the athletes that are specializing early on, we see some of those sport specific trends kind of influence that as well. But certainly we've seen changes.
Sorry, Heather, did you want to comment?
Sorry, I was talking to an athlete and I missed your question. So could you ask it again?
Have stress levels caused changes in the bodies of young men and women that you work on?
Oh, absolutely. I think, as I alluded to before, I think high stress, lack of sleep, all of those contribute to tons of soft tissue injuries, right? So overuse, you're getting your muscle strains. That's where those are coming from. Not all the time, right? But in a lot of what we're seeing in terms of, let's say a kid goes out to practice and he pulls his hamstring, and I'm like, how much sleep did you get last night? 3 hours, 4 hours. I was up doing a paper. I'm really stressed. I got an exam coming up. All those are contributing to, these soft tissue kind of chronic, injuries that we're seeing. And kids are not eating well. They're not getting enough sleep. Their stress levels, their cortisol levels are super high, right? And that's when all of these like soft tissue stuff happens. And they just lose focus too. Like that's also like when you lose focus and you go up for a header and you run into your teammate, right? And you just get a concussion, right? Because you're exhausted and you're not on top of your game and you're tired. So, all of those things kind of can contribute to tons of different injuries.
To me, the key to this thing, we have 3 parents on here. And my wife just joined. Hi, Miranda. Even with 3 parents, if you can say to your kids, hey, it's one thing to say, hey, have fun. Liz says, oh, come on, son, have fun, express yourself, turn the screens off, and really see if you can get your boys talking to you about what it's really like to be 17 these days. And just if they can offload their stress to mom or dad is one thing. The second thing is Kyle Hanford just texted me on my new iPhone 12 and said, I can't make it. I'm at my kid's Little League game. I said, well, there are 3 hockey parents on here. And I think we should get a bunch of parents to drive up to Williston, Northampton, which I don't think is actually in Northampton. Isn't it in East Hampton or Southampton? Wherever the heck it is. And drive down there, and I'll come and say, hey, fellas, we're going to change the whole season. We're all about fun this year. We don't care if we win. Take the air out of the outcome fever balloon. You know what I'm saying? And Danny and I are trying to do that at Northeastern, where all the rooms at Colgate too are made of cinder blocks. So you can see we all look like we're in jail. And we're trying to get with the women's hockey team and say, girls, remember, this is about fun. And one of the things, as I ramble a bit, is, and what do you guys see? I don't think Kip Jackson coaches high school football in New Hampshire. Coaches are under a lot of pressure. I think at Colgate and Northeastern and in prep school, probably. I think outcome fever affects coaches. I think it even affects parents. I mean, I joked about my flip phone, but I'm addicted to my flip phone. I'm looking, I'm multitasking. I feel a little guilty if I'm not doing 2 things at once. And I think and I love your comments, Liz and John and Janie and anybody. Is outcome fever affecting you guys as parents? I'll leave it at that. Outcome fever. Am I worried about how my kid does? Am I worried about how I'm looking? How am I worried? Is that real for you, any of you guys?
Academically, probably. I'm not gonna lie, but when it comes to hockey, no, not really. I don't care. Hey, listen, I mean, and I tell my son all the time, don't ever give up the dream. It's great to dream, NHL and whatever. But at the end of the day, school is more important, and it's over, man. It is what it is.
So you don't lay up in bed, John, worrying about, oh my God, my son may get a C plus.
No, I don't worry about that.
Right.
But I do want him to do well, though. I'm not. Listen, he's a great student. I think his average is like 99.8%. But I mean, I mean, he's really a bright kid. But no, I mean, if he gets 80 tomorrow, I'm not going to die. But if he gets a 70, I'm not going to lie to you. It's going to bother me.
You know,
It really
think about
is.
it though. When we got a 70 in school,
I was a genius. If we said we got 70,
I was shooting for 80s. I don't know. But if we got a 60, I ripped it up. I hid it in my math book. My mother never found out about it, right? So I decided I got to study in this class. But now the high schools have the portal, you know, where you can go and see,
yeah,
right?
everything right away. Exactly.
Everything right away.
Yeah,
Everything
right away.
Liz, do you get caught up in outcome fever yourself?
I do. I'm sorry. He's currently playing golf, and I will tell myself for like all day long, I know he has a match, and I'm just gonna say, "Did you have fun?" And he'll come home, and I'll start with, "Did you have fun?" And somewhere along the lines, I will work in, you know, how'd you do? You know, what place did you come in? And you know, I start with fun, and I really don't want to jump right into, you know, did you get to ride home in the front seat kind of thing. That's what, you know, whoever places highest gets to ride home in the front seat. So I'm like, you know, but it generally goes that direction eventually. So
You know,
I'm aware of it and I want to do better, but you know, I know that outcomes are important to him also. So
yeah, no, it happens. I mean, things have changed so much in the culture in 20, 30 years. I mean, I don't think my dad ever came to a game, you know, because he was busy working, and everything has changed. And Heather, you have a couple of kids of your own, don't you? Have a couple of high school or college kid and a high school kid?
I have one that's a freshman in college and one that's a junior in high school.
Do you yourself, even after you treat all this soft tissue and you see, do you yourself get caught up in a little bit of outcome fever?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I think I have outcome fever for my athletes. Like, you know, like I want everyone to be successful, you know, so it is really hard. And I think, you know, my son has been struggling academically this semester just because I think he's very homesick and, you know, he's been struggling a little bit. And so it's very hard to see someone that you love so much kind of struggling and going through these things, you know, and I have empathy, but I also want to, I'm kind of caught in the middle because I have this empathy that I'm like, well, if you want to come home, but I also want him to like stick it out and try and stick it through too, you know, kind of. So be strong and stick, and you got to stick with things, and that's part of life, right? You know, so I'm kind of torn between those two things. And, you know, at the end of the day, we all want our children to be successful, right? And we worry about their success based on like how they're feeling and all those things, you know? So, you know, do I lie awake at night thinking about it? Sure. You know, and I think he's not an athlete, but she is an athlete. So I think she's very nervous. She wants to go to college and play soccer somewhere. And, you know, she's very stressed out about those things. So you feel those things when they're your kids, you know, and you want them to be successful. So of course.
So I don't think outcome fever is actually the issue. I think the feeling that your success or failure is actually going to define you, that is the actual issue. Because I mean, we all are old enough to understand that at some point you're going to have an experience of failure. And unfortunately, we tend to try to protect those around us from experiencing those failures when in fact, that's when they're going to learn the most. And I mean, I personally, I hate losing at everything I do, but we never talk about the outcome of a game as a team. And just because that's not the most important thing. The most important thing is the lesson that we learn as we go through this journey.
Yeah, no, 100%. This idea of what you do defining you. And these athletes, these three boys who are playing prep school hockey, your sons are obviously talented, or they wouldn't be playing prep school hockey. And they get in the lane, and it's hard to steer clear of the outcome fever and just have a good time playing the game you love. Janie, did you have any comment on the whole outcome fever thing?
Well, I would say that outcome fever is a huge problem. And I think that it is partially a result of the way that competitive sports are structured. And I know having a full-time professional job, having 2 kids playing travel hockey, spending an enormous amount of money, you want the kids to have fun, but there's a certain point where you expect them to take it seriously. And I'm not saying that you're expecting a result, but it's a lot of work for the parents, and it's very tricky. It is very tricky. And there's a fine line between balancing the fun part of it and the hard work, and making sure your child is in the right program that meshes with the family's philosophy.
Yeah, in the hockey world, huh?
It's probably true of all sports. Just highly competitive sports, the amount of time, energy, travel, money, parental, devotion, it's significant. And that leads to outcome fever. It does. That's just a fact.
Yeah. There's this debate, Kip and Dan and Heather, there's a debate. I have a friend who runs a travel baseball program. And he says to me that if the boys don't specialize by 9th grade and just play baseball, they'll never be that good. And I say to him, I think that's hogwash.
I think he can, I have a lot of things I could say right now, but it'll not be good, so.
Do you think that's hogwash? Do you think kids can play 2 and 3 sports and still get
Yeah.
at one of them?
Yes, most definitely.
Yeah. I mean, I agree too. And I'm not to throw my friend on the bus, but he makes his living on the philosophy that you got to specialize. That's how he makes his living. But Dan and Heather, what do you say about that when it comes to the physical body, specializing in a sport? How do you guys feel about that question?
I think that the more diverse the athletic experiences and exposures can be, the better the adaptations are going to be.
Now, what does that mean in English for a social worker?
I think, and we already brought up the emotional tone piece. I think we want our athletes, let's use music as the analogy here, but we want them to play multiple instruments, and we want them to be able to play multiple styles of that instrument. And I think when the exposure to stress is very similar, which happens when you specialize in a sport, maybe that's obviously your best sport because it's the one that you're specializing in. I think it's good to try things that you're not as good at, or your second or your third sport. I think it's good to swing a bat after you've been skating all winter long, or to play soccer before you go into another type of season. And I agree. There's been so many great comments made, but I think it's so important that we give our student athletes the opportunity to go out there and just perform. And Jeff, you're a music guy, so I think that's why I go to the music metaphors. But you want to go out on stage and forget about the crowd because you have your guitar or whatever your instrument is, and just jam, and then go back to the dressing room or locker room and look in the mirror and know that was, I gave it my all. and today it was good enough, or, some days it's not going to be good enough. But there's so many other factors that go into the outcomes of any one of these games. Refs, weather, lucky bounces, whatever you want to call it. So, and someone had said this earlier, to let those moments define your whole being, that creates a lot of pressure. And when we look at the tone, the harder that these young people are trying, the less proficient they are with all these athletic qualities. Their jump numbers go down, their movement quality goes down, their breathing is decreased, cognitive function, all of that stuff. Anxiety is a huge indicator of risk for injury. So I think there's exposure is great, different intensities is great, success and failure alike are, they're all going to be positive if we're focused on the process.
I mean, I agree totally with I just put in the chat, the goal in this webinar. Wait a minute, did I hit send? In this webinar, Jeff and guests talk about how important knowing how it is to be vulnerable in athletics, because giving your all is a form of being vulnerable. If you really think about that, Danny just said, go out on stage and give it your all. When I think about playing pond hockey as a kid, you could give it your all. You could play in high school sports. For me, you could, and these kids, it's just based on the idea of the outcome of winning. And you see teams get tight when they're down 3-2 in a soccer game, or whatever it is. And the reason people play sports, I think, is to just see what people are made of, see what happens. And I guess the form of vulnerability, as I'm talking out loud, that you want kids to have is, again, I don't care what the outcome is. I just want to be there with my teammates and have a good time and just give it my all. And I wonder if you guys have any thoughts for these three hockey parents. Direct ideas, Heather and Dan and Kip too, and Miranda, anybody on the call. How can you communicate to your son in the absence of getting in the locker room with all these Williston hockey kids? How do you try to communicate to your son? Look, in other words, you might not use the V word, but give it your all. Doesn't matter how the results go. How do you do that in a culture where there's so much focus on results? Right? It's hard. Because, Liz can say to her son, hey, why don't you make some connections? Don't worry about things. I wish I knew the answer. I don't know that I do know the answer. How, John, Janie, how do you do that? How do you communicate to the kid? Because I guess the reality is, Janie, you said it, it costs a fortune. You're driving all over New England. I guess you get invested. My wife and I don't have kids, but I guess you get invested in, wait a minute, we need some results here, right? I would get invested in that. So I wish I knew. I'm not sure how you do that in the absence of being with all the kids. If Dan and I talk to the men's hockey team at Northeastern, you can get 19-year-old boys' attention, 20-year-old boy. Danny, what do you think? You can say, hey, boys, don't worry about the outcome. Riley, Johnny, don't worry, but they are worried. They're trying to get to the next step. Like I think someone said, I think Janie said, the next step, always to the next. What do you think, Dan?
I agree. I think we've seen that with the Northeastern teams throughout this year, where, a tight game, close checking game, and, we go down by one, or even, tied game. The Beanpot is a perfect example. We watched that together. So, I don't know if anyone saw that game, but, pretty even match game against BU. And we just saw the game go away, slip away, and us tighten up, become a little bit more calculating, a little bit more hesitant. And I always think of it as they're trying too hard not to lose. And and I think this probably goes back to vulnerability, like there's a risk of losing. You know, the outcome, it's any one of these games comes down most of the time to just fractions of an inch, one play or you know, not a huge difference. And there's something magical about going on stage, even if you're not good at the musician, you know, at the instrument or a good singer, and just, you know, rocking out. And that, like, I don't think we have enough of our young athletes, even at the college level, who are just going out there and competing because they want to do everything they can to win for their teammates or to just be competitive. But then when that doesn't happen, you know, they may not get the outcome they want. There has to be a sense of confidence in, you know, I have, you know, I did give it my all. You know, I wasn't hesitant in any of those critical moments. And that's I think where the magic lies. You know, how are we responding in those big moments? You know, and did we grip our stick tight, or did we slowly exhale and just let it come to us? Even if it is a fraction of a second, there is a difference in how we respond. So I don't know if that answered the question, Jeff, but you know how I like to ramble.
I'm not sure there's an easy answer. Janie and John and Liz, right? If you said to your son this summer, hey, I was on this call and I heard about this thing called outcome fever. I want to talk to you about it, and explained it at the age appropriate level, would you get, Dad, leave me alone, will you? Or do you think these boys would listen? Ma, leave me alone. Do you think they would listen to that conversation? What do you guys think, you three parents?
Oh, my son would listen. He would sit and listen.
Because
But-
that's,
You know,
yeah, go
but it
ahead.
wouldn't be a long conversation because I don't push him. You know, before every game, all I tell him is go out and have fun. Who cares? Just go have fun. It doesn't really matter. That's it. If it's meant to be, it's meant to be. If it's not, it's not. Because I don't want to be the reason why he's playing. I don't want to be the reason. I want him to want to do it. If he doesn't want to do it, then what's the point?
But do you guys think a discussion about outcome and explaining how the generation is focused and how the world is confusing, and do you guys think that would help your son? I mean, I find that it helps the athletes, but I'm not their parent. I'm in a locker room with a bunch of kids that never met me, and I explain that, and it seems to help them.
In my
Yeah.
case, I
So
think it would be, he'd listen and he would say that's unrealistic. He would say, you know, I'm trying to make it to college hockey. I can't make a mistake. You know, I have to play at a certain level. I don't have to put pressure on him because he puts enough pressure on himself.
Right.
But, well, you know, I can't, if I make a mistake, I'll get benched. I won't play. I may not make the team next, not prep school team, but I think they understand when they're trying to play at a college level that they feel they can't make mistakes. They can't be vulnerable. They can't tell their coach, you know what, I'm not feeling well today, or my hip flexor is really bothering me. They go play. They can't be vulnerable because it will be seen as a sign of weakness, or they see it as a sign of weakness, and they see it as another strike against them. And it's so competitive that these kids feel that they can't make a mistake. They can't just get out there and jam, right? Because if they hit the wrong note, they won't play. They won't be in the orchestra. So I think the reality is a little different. With the conversation, he would listen, but I think I'm not sure what the solution is, given the extraordinarily competitive world of athletics and academics, for that matter, that these kids live in.
I agree with you. I think the only way I've had success as a professional counselor, one-on-one with an athlete over a few sessions, I can get to them. but I've had a lot of success with sports teams. If and only if the coach is on board. If the coach is feverish about his ego or his salary or her, it's very difficult to create an atmosphere of fun and vulnerability and let's jam and see what song we play. It's true. It's hard. Dan Boothby and I talk about it all the time. There's no easy answer to it. Heather, you look kind of pensive. Are you having some thoughts about it?
Yeah, I mean, I think I was just thinking about what I would do in those situations. And I've had many guys come into my office, and I work with a men's team. And I'm obviously their mom, essentially. Like, athletic trainers wear many hats, you know, like we're fixing kids, we're moms, we're like everything, you know. So and you know, I approach it in terms of, you know, listen, like, let me be your advocate. This doesn't need to come, like, you're injured, like, let me be the person that's taking this practice from you. Let me be the person that's giving you this day off, and it doesn't have to come back on you. And sometimes I feel like that's a good enough stressor. Like, it takes a little bit of stress off of these kids to be like, okay, like, I'm going to tell coach that I'm pulling you for today because of this, this, and this, and you need to rest, those kinds of things. And I know maybe every kid can do that, you know, in terms of like coming in and confiding in their athletic trainer or talking to somebody they feel comfortable with. But I think sometimes we just need to be advocates. Like, if your son comes to you and is like, yeah, like, I'm just exhausted, or my hip flexor is killing me, then I think sometimes you just have to take control and be like, okay, like, we're not going to hockey today, or I'm just going to let you rest today, and I don't care what you say, and let me be the bad person and let me be the bad guy for you, those kinds of things. And that's kind of how I approach when kids come to my office and they're just either, and sometimes they may not have anything wrong with them. Sometimes they're just so stressed out that I just know that they're going to injure themselves. And you need to get some sleep. Like, that's the bottom line. You need to eat a meal, you know, those kinds of things. Go home, get some rest, refocus a little bit. You need a day, I'll give it to you, those kinds of things. So, you know, I don't know, I think maybe as a parent, that might be harder because I'm not these kids' parents, right? Like, I'm just some outsider kind of feeling their vulnerability, you know. I think it may be harder as a parent to be that objective, you know. So, but that's just kind of how I deal with some situations like that.
Yeah, I mean, where I keep coming back to on this deal is, and there happen to be 3 parents on here from the same team, I think, and I'm happy to talk to Kyle Hanford and Coach Cunha about this, because the irony, and I think Kyle and Coach Cunha are pretty good, but there's pressure on them. But ironically, if they just make the season about work hard, play hard, let's have a good time, and the results will take care of themselves, if that's really what they're singing, I think you can get through to a group of kids. I think it's to be done with the group, frankly. That's how I look at it. You have some thoughts there, Liz?
I just agree. I think it's really nice. I think that, you know, in the back of their minds, a lot of players are really going to be focusing on, you know, on the end score. But if you focus on the fun, I think that it can really take a little bit of pressure off, and they can actually be more successful. And, you know, I've seen it in different sports, you know, so.
I mean, it's a cultural wide problem. I mean, you drive down the street and you see 6-year-olds playing soccer in full uniforms with referees and blowing whistles and trophies. And these kids should be learning how to use Play-Doh and stare at butterflies, but they're out there competing from a very young age. And it's, by the time they get to be 17, 19, 21, they're on that train of next thing. I mean, it's not an easy solution. It just isn't. I think this conversation is great. You know, we'll do this again in 2 weeks. I wish there were 150 parents on here, but it's a sign of how busy people are. They're super busy with this stuff. I want to thank you, Heather and Dan, for coming on, and you 3 parents for coming on. And Kip, thanks for coming on. I'm sorry you didn't turn your camera on. Everybody knows you're the most handsome man in New Hampshire.
That bar's pretty low if I'm the most handsome man in New Hampshire, but thank you for saying that.
Does any of you guys have a question or anything? Any comment? Janie, Liz, John? No? How many cats do you have, Liz? We did see one long-haired cat come into view.
We have 2 cats and we adore them. They're a lot of fun.
I got the feeling are you a teacher yourself?
No.
Oh. Yeah.
I do events for Cornell, so I
Events for.
spend a lot of time. Yeah, so I spend a lot of time coordinating Zoom calls, so it's kind of nice not to be in charge of this one.
Well, it's a good segue into thanking Abby with her orange background for producing these calls. And if there's nothing else, we can end a couple minutes early. You'll get an invite in 2 weeks. And again, I think it's at the top, very top of this chat. There's a link to watch the first one. We had Sean McDonald on and the fella from Bates. I can't remember. Judge Broderick was, I think, on a couple of Tuesdays ago. But
It's the same link for tonight, we should mention,
it's the same link for tonight.
to come in 2 weeks.
Oh, to come in 2 weeks. Yeah, you hit the same link, but you'll get a fresh invite. But I'm saying the link to the first one, the YouTube link
Oh, right.
to the first one is in the chat at the very top. Like I know once the Zoom call ends, you can't get to it. So
I'll resend real quick. Oh, wait, that's wrong. Hold on.
meet Raleigh.
There you go.
Oh,
There's the last thing I had saved. There you go.
oh, that's a cat that's looking for a home, I think.
Yeah, if anyone wants to adopt a cat. Little shameless plug.
Well, maybe Liz, you're ready for third cat, Raleigh.
Yeah. Maybe I knew.
I'm sorry, absolutely not. 2 is our number.
Raleigh's looking for an events coordinator, a Zoom event coordinator. Okay, Heather, I'll be down your office. My hip flexor is killing me.
Yeah.
Jeff,
Thank you.
Heather's a
Got you.
Central Connecticut grad.
Central Connecticut.
See, I spent too much time with Coach Erickson when I got there. And I did get strong, but not more athletic.
So wait a minute, you two guys, you attended Central Connecticut at the same time.
I might be a little older, maybe.
I think I was right after 2001. I started at Maine.
Gotcha.
Tom and Kathy in the training room.
Oh yeah, they're still there. It's crazy. So yeah, they've been there forever. So
All right. Well, thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Talk to you soon. Thanks.